Good afternoon, everyone. We'll probably have a few more people straggling in, but I mentioned this a few minutes ago. I'm all about being punctual. So who's in favor of us going in and starting right now since it's 1:30? Yeah. All right. So as you can gather, we're here to speak about how we can outlive your health span, whatever the heck that means, which hopefully we'll learn in a few seconds. It's going to be covering a really good book entitled Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. Does that name sound familiar, that book? Did anyone in this room read it ahead of time? Okay, good, perfect. Because if you did, I was going to have you come up here and do it. So. But I'll go ahead and do it since I'm the only one who read it so far. So we'll cover this, as you could tell, big book. It's a New York Times bestseller, came out last year. Rave reviews, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why the book is important, how that relates to us. So today, the way we'll do this is I'm going to open up a video here, and we can watch this for a couple minutes together just to kind of dive in, and then we'll go kind of over the housekeeping things. Okay, so I'm going to play this video, which takes about a couple minutes, and this should be very insightful.
I woke up one morning and most of my teeth had just disintegrated. They just weren't there. Did I swallow them in my sleep? So everybody, boys and girls, brush your teeth very well at night before you go to bed.
The doctor put me on Hennessy in 1972 because I had poor circulation. I take me a little shot glass straight.
Every day?
Yeah, why not?
My name is Myrtle Kaplan. I am 110 months.
I am 107.
100 years and 3 months. My daughter says I'm 100. Like now, I don't know how I reached 100. I can't believe it.
Can I ask for your advice on staying so healthy and being in such good shape?
Get enough sleep, eat a good meal, eat spaghetti. I like spaghetti with red sauce. You make it, though.
Eat for nutrition, not for taste. I take cod liver oil in the morning. Some people say, cod liver oil. I take it every morning. I take my orange juice and all kind of vegetables, good for your eyes. Apples is like a mild laxative. So if you eat that before you go to bed, well, in the morning, you know where you have to go.
If I get too nervous, it affects my stomach. I do take a certain pill. This doctor I had years ago gave me this pill, and I take it, and it keeps me calm.
I didn't like spicy food, and I didn't like liquor. I never smoked.
I do feel that walking is very important. I try to walk every day.
Make sure you exercise some everyday exercise. It's the best medicine out there.
I used to exercise when I was young with Jack LaLanne. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah.
I used to get up in the morning and exercise with him.
If your feet hurt, massage it, bend your toes, touch your legs, twist up, and be like a rubber band all over the place. So
I used to love dancing. My main thing was the Peabody, if you know that. You go 1, 2, 3, cross, 1, 2, 3, cross, go around. It's hard to explain the Peabody.
back in those days, in poor neighborhoods that didn't have a lot of parks, playgrounds or stuff like that to really, and then you did your own workout. You did your own swings under the fire escapes.
We rode bikes and we climbed in the White Mountains in New Hampshire.
At my age, you should lie down in the afternoon and rest because your body can only take so much. You don't need it if you're young and busy and working and keeping busy. That's your life.
If you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Lot of powerful statements, all very, very interesting, and I heard some laughter and agreement. And in general, That video, as you can tell, was 6 centenarians. You've heard that term before, people who are 100 or better, giving experiences of how they stay fit and healthy. And the bottom line is, I don't know if you could tell, they all had one thing in common. They were all ladies. So guys in the room, including myself, we're screwed. Sorry. So if there's nothing else you learn, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, there was a lot to unpack in both that video as well as the following book that we're going to cover in this presentation. Again, called Outlive, and again, the gentleman is Dr. Peter Attia. He's a Canadian medical doctor, very interesting. I'm not going to go too much into detail about his backstory. You can always look him up. But he's kind of the Jack LaLanne, you heard that, of today in terms of both being a medical professional, but also an exercise physiologist. And that is what we're going to discuss a lot in our objectives. So this presentation is going to kind of be broken down into 3 segments. We're going to be looking at what's called Medicine 3.0 in just a few seconds. I'm going to explain what that means. I'm going to guess probably nobody in here probably heard of that term if you haven't read this book. The second segment, we'll talk about the science of longevity, lifespan, and why it's important not only to learn the concept of lifespan, but also health span is what we're going to be talking about as well. And then finally, we're going to be tying it all together into hopefully bridging the gap, so to speak, of lifespan and health span. What I mean by that? Lifespan is basically the number in the age of what we're going to live to. Nobody knows that in this room at all, okay? And eventually, there's going to be lots of ideas and advice that we're going to cover on how to achieve the long-range goal. But on top of that, and we'll show you a graph here in a minute, health span is arguably just as important. And here's why. Health span, the definition of that is how well you are living during your lifespan. Because who would want to live to 100 if we're in constant pain, hurting, and miserable, right? I wouldn't. I mean, why would we? And the goal would be to live not only pain-free, but also emotionally stable, physically fit, mindfully healthy, and etc. So we're going to cover a lot of what's involved in what he likes to refer to as Medicine 3.0, which is the era that basically we're in right now in the 2020s. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at medicine in 3 stages, the first stage being any time before the mid-19th century. So we're talking about around 1850. Before then, there was what's called Medicine 1.0, or really the non-existence of medicine. Because before there was such a thing as what we now know as modern medicine, the age expectancy of a person, depending on gender and some other variables, was around 50 years old. That's what we could expect to live to when we were before born during the mid-19th century. And then, of course, germ theory happened sometime around that time when we learned about things like penicillin and the importance of washing hands and antibacterial, antiviral. And that led us into Medicine 2.0, which really helped out in terms of not only making the lifespan a little longer to roughly about 70s, 80s, depending on, and we keep going longer. We're pushing that lifespan now further and further out because they're learning more about innovations with health and medicine and how to live longer. But also being able to treat what they call the 4 horsemen, which we're going to look at also in a few slides. What I mean by the 4 horsemen, those are the 4 leading causes of death in the world, and pretty much all of us know all 4 of them. We all may have experienced ourselves, or we may know somebody that has gone through it as well. That's in addition to that. So when we take a look, let me get back up for a second again. I didn't want to skip over this. One thing that I wanted to talk about is today when you gather from the objectives, my goal to you is you're going to get a personalized type of approach for your own health span. And I'll explain what that means as well. So just please have that in the back of your mind because I'm going to give some examples of that too. And also how we're going to be treating disease if we do ourselves have some form of a serious ailment, or if we know somebody dealing with something like that as well. So the cool thing is, it's never too late. It's cliche. You've heard it all the time that people will say, it's too late, or, what do I have to do to lose weight? And okay, eat right, exercise, diet. We know all that already, okay? Not going to bore you by pounding that in and preaching to the church. So we've already heard that a million times over. We're going to really dive into the science of why that's important. So this is what I'm talking about here. again, it's kind of a rethinking medicine in terms of medicine 2.0, as I mentioned, up to about right now where we're in for the last, say, 170 years, because like I said, it was like the mid 1800s. During that time, up to now, the science of it was taking us and being what's called preventative medicine. So what I mean by that is, if we get some form of disease, then we go to the doctor and they treat us by either prescribing us medication or they do surgery on us, and that is what's called preventative medicine. Now, medicine 3.0, this is where the real enlightenment is. It's not preventative medicine, it's proactive medicine. And what I mean by that is attacking those diseases before they even start, or as early as we can, which is today, because today is the earliest, the youngest that we are in our lifespan right now. And so, in other words, you all know that people will get cancer and cardiovascular disease and et cetera. But we're going to talk about what you can do to prevent that. One of the ladies at the end of that video said something extremely powerful, that who knows what the best drug is to anti-aging and anti-disease. She named it. What was the best drug to do every day? Exercise, exactly, right. And that is so true. And that ties into that 4 horsemen what I was mentioning too, what we're going to take a look at. I mentioned this in an illustration. Now you can kind of see it. So again, like I said, up to about 1850 or so, that was our life expectancy, believe it or not, just under 50. So we're pretty lucky to be here now, right? All the people up to past that, like baby boomers and such, and now millennials who are going to be approaching wherever, when they look at their lifespan, if you look at this chart, the health span is just kind of a declining regression, and then eventually, nobody wants to think about it. We are going to die. I mean, everybody in here, we don't know when, but our goal is to, while we're here, live as healthy as possible. Where we're at now with this medicine 3.0, the goal of that health span, rather than as we're aging, kind of just going down in a linear regression in terms of, okay, we're going to develop type 2 diabetes, or we've got Parkinson's, or what have you. That is so common. And when medicine 2.0 came in, this little part right here, they extended our life expectancy to about a decade to just fight that off at the last set of years. But that's not good enough for us. What we want with medicine 3.0, why do we have to go down here in our lifespan? Let's extend it out way up there. You can see the dotted line. And then if we're whatever, those ladies were all over 100, so the 106, 110, what have you. When you were that age, our goal is our last day, we want to just drop dead. That's the best. Nobody wants to think about that part, but that is the goal, right? That would be the best, to live life to the fullest, basically, so that way, that our last day, we would have done everything we can to be healthy and fit, if that makes sense, okay? So that's where we're at right now. That's how cool, again, like I mentioned, medicine 3.0. I mentioned the evil 4 horsemen in our case of what attacks everybody in terms of the last, again, medicine 2.0 of what we try to treat. We all know that the very first one, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, that's still the leading cause of death by far. Close number 2 is cancer, and then we have neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia and such, and then finally type 2 diabetes. Here's why this is important in terms of why are we talking about those 4. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I could sit here for 40 minutes and just bore you to death and say, yeah, this is why you should exercise, this is why you should eat good. We're not going to talk about that. There's plenty of topics on that. There's 40,000 books on Amazon that tell you how to eat right. And so what we want in this kind of jam-packed session is to talk about the science of it. And here's one thing. What's interesting is that these 4 types of ailments and diseases, they are all interconnected. Science has proven that insulin resistance is the most evil common denominator of all of these 4 right here. That's why metabolic disease is so important, knowing about what your glucose is and what your insulin level is. We're going to jump into that as well, too. See, the science of it is so important. Here's why I said proactive medicine versus preventative medicine. I'm borrowing from Dr. Attia. That's his concept, not mine. But he preaches about it so much that I'll give you an example. I do a lot of personal training in Atlanta. That's my main job. And one of the members there, I trained some of her family. She's only 52. This is 2 years ago. Very fit lady. I mean, she looks very athletic, 52, very young. Exercised like a fiend. Did the boot camp classes. And one morning, unfortunately, I heard sirens going on. I was at the fitness center there in Buckhead, and there was about 20 people doing a boot camp class outside, probably around 8 or so in the morning. It was August. It was really hot. And all of a sudden, later that afternoon, I find out from their immediate family that she had had a massive heart attack. They're doing jumping jacks. She falls down, hits the back of her head. She's knocked unconscious. Piedmont Hospital down the street comes and picks her up. They take her to the hospital. They can't get a pulse. They've tried CPR. They can't get a heart rate or breathing or any signs of life. They put her on an intubator, and later that evening, the family decided to pull the plug on her. 52. Doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, how does that happen? Is that an outlier? Possibly, but in the concept of something, when you hear something like that, most likely she had an underlying disease that was going on that was undetected that she didn't check for. And she did, because then they found out it was the widowmaker. You've heard of that. That basically she had a high calcium score, didn't know it, didn't get it tested proactively, because as we know, when you go to the doctor, every doctor has a different philosophy. Every doctor is going to have you come in and they're going to run tests and diagnostics that they think is important. Dr. Attia says it's our job to be proactive and say, I want you to check my calcium score. I want you to see how my prevalence of atherosclerosis is. I want you to tell me what my latest glucose monitor is. By the way, which we can do ourselves very easily. You can purchase that on Amazon very inexpensively and check it regularly. Check your insulin levels, because again, all of those are tied in somehow. It's very messy. These four horsemen kind of work together interconnectedly, that in her case, that example that I'm talking about, most likely, had she gone in, say, her 30s or 40s, the earlier the better, obviously, she could have probably not only prevented that, fixed it, reversed it, and still been here today with a low calcium score and being very fit. There are people that you hear about who are very athletic that have high cholesterol. How does that happen, right? Then there are people who are morbidly obese that drink like crazy, and then they live up to 100. That doesn't make sense. But a lot of it, yes, some of it's genetics, but not all of it, though, okay? And you heard those ladies, again, there was so much powerful information, that little 2 or 3 minute video, those ladies, that they had mentioned in terms of moving every day. One of the ladies mentioned brushing her teeth every day, right? Why that's so important, that's actually in the book in terms of making sure we floss every day and have very good dental hygiene. Why? Because of the correlation, the studies that have been put on the healthier our gum disease is in terms of avoiding gum disease. If you have signs of gum disease or some things that are going to attack it, most of those germs and bacteria will go through our body and most likely attack our cardiovascular respiratory system. Okay, so that's why basically it just really goes interconnectedly of taking care of ourselves in a personalized approach. You'll hear me say that a lot during this time while we're talking. And then the Tinkerer's Code, meaning basically walking through life is kind of tinkering with how we are in a personalized way of our own health span. Here's what I mean. Here's an example, and this is taken right from the book. In Medicine 2.0 and in current modern medicine with doctors, and by the way, let me preface this is not to beat up the doctors and medical doctors. He even says in the book, he acknowledges we need him. He's a retired cancer surgeon, by the way, also. So those are his friends. That's his family. But he's saying that what's missing is the holistic approach of bridging that gap of both personalizing it to ourselves, because what works for you may not work for you and me, etc., right? And also the naturopathic way of determining, a lot of this is very preventable. So the example that he provides is the Titanic. In terms of medicine, it's when you're on a group on a ship like the Titanic and you're headed towards an iceberg that you don't know about, it's up to that captain, or in this case the doctor, to have to worry about steering the ship. But your body's on that ship. Well, what he wants us to do is to have our own ship, our own boat, our own life preserver, and why don't we drive that ship rather than the captain? Because then we can look and see if we see any icebergs. I'm not suggesting that we're smarter than medical doctors. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is let's research a little bit more in depth, like that example, that lady. Okay, well, she had atherosclerosis, she had the widowmaker, she had a high calcium score. What I'm going to start doing today, I'm going to go to my doctor and tell him about that story. Hey, what can I do so that doesn't happen to me? Can we check my calcium score? Can we check to make sure that my triglyceride level is in check? Because again, a medical doctor is going to do the basic diagnosis of where we're at. We're going to do a physical, and we're going to see how our blood pressure is, our heart rate, and all that great stuff. That's fine. But there are some underlying things that need to be checked and detected that we need to know about so that we could be, again, proactive on personalizing it for ourselves. So you'll see that as a common thread as we talk throughout the presentation as well. It's important to do what they call building a framework. And, again, this is basically like what those ladies were saying. A lot of them were saying that you have to enjoy life. I think one of them, I heard she takes a shot of Hennessy and whiskey, which is totally fine, by the way, too. This is the thing about the ladies that were on that video. They weren't necessarily outliers, although the chances of living to being a centenarian is about 0.03% chance, but we're improving it. And the good thing in Medicine 3.0, there's no reason why we can't continue to improve that as well. Because what we know about medicine, also bridging that with what we can do preventatively will really help us out so that we can optimize our health. And another thing that she had mentioned was not only exercising, but again, none of those ladies claim to be elite athletes. They didn't go on there and say, yeah, I worked out every single day, the hardest I could. I ran sprints. They didn't say, you didn't hear that. You didn't hear them talking about bench pressing and doing squats and push-ups, although some of them might have. But I guarantee you that if you look at those ladies, you have to take a look at the whole total picture of not only their physical fitness, their mind, their emotional stability, and also their personal purpose and passion in life. That's discussed a little bit as well. And the importance of that also is because that keeps us happy. I'll get to that too, because that's the last chapter of the book, so don't let me jump in front of myself. But I will say that, when you talk about living as long as we can, there's a really good statement that the longer somebody lives, the older someone is, that's a definition that shows that they've lived a healthy lifestyle, right? Because if we're whatever age we are, well, if we're older, if we're in our 80s, in our 90s, if we're in our hundreds, that means that we have had a very healthy lifestyle, obviously, right? None of those ladies would have done, they didn't get on here on the opposite end and tell you that they got drunk every day and, didn't work out. You didn't hear that as well. So again, it's a really important balance, but they call it the centenarian decathlon. And what that is that using them as an example, anybody over 100, they're not really great at one thing, but they're probably pretty good at many things. Just like your Olympic decathlon athlete, they are like the echelon of excellence. They're the prestige athlete that all of the other athletes aspire to, because they're able to do 10 different events, such as swimming, biking, running, and throw in whatever else sporting events that they're doing. And they're not the master of all of them, but they are pretty exceptional at all of them as well too, because the more that you're able to optimize all of the variables in our life as far as eating, exercise, feeling well, making personal relationships. I've talked a lot about these. For those of you who've met me before in previous discussions, the importance of relationships and social connectedness, and the importance of focusing on what we have and not so much focusing on what we don't have anymore, focusing on what we can still do and not necessarily dwelling on what we can't do anymore. Things like that is very, very important in their life and their lifespan and health span. So we talk about one of the first important things to combat those four horsemen, your cardiovascular system. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we can go to the doctor and check for biomarkers like this, really get into detail. Dr. Attia tells all of his clients to get what's called a DEXA scan every year. It's very inexpensive. It's about $75. You can get your body composition analyzed. It takes about 6 minutes. You can dress as you are. You don't have to take anything off. You could sit right where you're at, and it's very non-invasive. And they'll run a complete, it's almost like imaging, basically, like an ultrasound, where they are able to tell your visceral fat, your subcutaneous fat, what fat you have in your body, what the composition is, how much fat is on your liver, how much fat is in the organs, all throughout the body. So I strongly recommend that too, in terms of going to the doctor and getting some types of checks like MRIs, like ultrasounds. Be your own advocate, because they won't. The doctors, I'm not saying that they're not doing it intentionally. I'm just saying that they might not have the manpower to be able to, but that's the way that medicine's been up to this point. And so we really have to fight for ourselves. And then you will see in every single slide the word exercise. You heard it. I heard it loud from all of you. Exercise, that's the good news. When you talk about cancer, heart disease, any type of neurodegenerative disease, and type 2 diabetes, exercise can only help. And it's all about cellular biology. You'll learn all about the blood cells in terms of how they're optimized. And again, it just makes sense. It goes hand in hand with why we're told to exercise all the time. And so that's the science of it in terms of, when you combine that in a total way of eating healthy and everything else we're talking about. And I mentioned this too, the metabolic problem, that's the other underlying problem. I mentioned it. If there's one takeaway from this whole presentation, just remember insulin resistance is the big evil tying all of this together. Insulin resistance is found in research that will show you when people have various forms of cancers and heart conditions like congenital heart disease and what have you, any forms of the neurodegenerative diseases. Usually, one of the things that they find is that there's a problem going on with insulin resistance. And so I mentioned it earlier, if you get your own glucose monitor checked, check it as much as possible. This ties into why it's so important that if we know that it's in optimal range, we can avoid things like metabolic diseases. And so again, there's different interventions. Here it is again, regular physical activity, but also the book jumps into things like fasting and a little bit more detail on macronutrients. Basically, and we'll talk about that when we get to nutrition, but basically protein is very key and vital. Dr. Attia is a huge proponent of what's called the keto diet, aka the ketogenic diet, meaning high protein, stay away from the carbs. That's a real blanket statement on it, but really there's a whole chapter he devotes to talking about the importance of tree nuts and extra virgin olive oil and any types of those saturated fats to stay away from, because any of the saturated fats, they've had studies that show that those are usually tied together also and connected with people having problems with these ailments and diseases. We talked about cancer as well, and by a show of hands, anybody in the room, you know anybody that's had some form of cancer? Yeah, pretty much all of us, right? Yeah. And the thing is that it's really sad. In my neighborhood where I live at, we have 3 families, all 3 ladies, they're in their 40s, and they each have a different form of cancer that they're fighting right now. And again, maybe perhaps this was going to happen already, that the diagnosis will already happen. But what Dr. Attia is preaching and kind of suggesting is that we know the science of what underlies with causing cancer. We just went over it a little bit ago. And also medicine 3.0 is getting to the point where someday we may have a not only treatment but cure for some of the cancers that we know of today, which is amazing. That's wonderful. That would be ideal. But as I mentioned, the heart and essence of the book is to be proactive and get early detection for us guys in the room. Prostate cancer, for all of us in the room, colon cancer, those are things that are easily trackable and being able to detect and treat right away at an early young age as possible. So that's something that we should always get checked out. Women with breast cancer, ovarian cancer, you name it. Again, what can we do? Well, live with a lifestyle of incorporating good eating and exercise. And again, the key is just knowing that personalized program for yourself. Here's another example. So my trait as a personal trainer, I've been doing personal training forever. Group exercise, which is wonderful. They have that, I know, here in Fayette Senior Services. And that's terrific. That is getting together in camaraderie and working together and doing exercise to music and everything else. That's wonderful. That is great. Personal training is what I do, where I individually work with people and have a set of what I know what those people's constructs are, whether their strengths are this and their challenges are this and their goals, these are their benchmarks, what have you. Well, that's what I want you to do for yourself. Be your own personal trainer. Be your own advocate. So yes, keep doing group exercise, keep doing power walking with friends, go swimming, go do daily activities and all of that. But one thing that I'm really wanting when you leave here, what I'm hoping is that you will be your own captain of your ship, like I said earlier in that example. So you'll know the icebergs to be careful of and how to avoid them. and then say, okay, well, you know what? When was the last time I got my check for skin cancer? Maybe we're already doing that, which is great. That's awesome. And there's other things that we could think of. When's the last time we've had this type of exam? Because a lot of that you have to check and ask the doctor, and a lot of it is covered under insurance or Medicare or what have you, whatever we're using. So I strongly urge and encourage you to do that. Now as we move to neurodegenerative disease, the thing is with this one, this is a little trickier. Yes, we can treat cardiovascular and cancers and such like that, but with neurodegenerative disease, it's a little different. This is a mystery still, and here's why. Because as we know, going back to medicine 1.0, people lived up to almost 50 and then they were dead. And that was a fast death, right? That's what we knew as fast death. They would just die and that was it. That was normal back then. And then later, from like 1850 to about 2020 or what have you, in the last 150 years, 170 years, we've looked at it as a slow death because we've talked about, like, people will always say, gosh, why is there's so much more Alzheimer's now and Parkinson's? Why do we see that much more? Well, because Medicine 2.0 was not only able to keep our lifespan longer, but then also in the Industrial Revolution, we learned that more forms of cancer had really exponentially gone up. And again, not to say that that's a bad thing, but that's just what happened. That's just a byproduct of living longer. And so what Medicine 2.0 did, the medical intervention, was to, okay, we're going to stop the cancer and treat it and try to prevent it as much as possible from spreading when we're in our 70s, 80s, and hopefully 90s, what have you. But again, now, today, if we're able to go in and see biomarkers, and another one you can do too, to go into the doctor and, you've heard this, where people are related as well. I know that in this biomarker runs my family that they have dementia. Am I going to have it? We can get that checked. Am I going to have Alzheimer's? And if we are, again, we can work on that already for what's called cognition, or AKA brain health. The cool thing is, the brain, everything that's good for the brain is also good for the heart, and vice versa. Everything that's good for the heart is good for the brain, including exercise. And that's why you see a lot of different, for example, there's a boxing class that, I don't know if they do that here, but up in Atlanta, there's boxing for Parkinson's patients. They really do that. It's called Movers and Shakers. That's the real name of it. So I don't know who came up with it, but they do that at a church at the Peachtree Road United Methodist Church in Buckhead on Peachtree Road. And it's a program where anybody with Parkinson's, they put the boxing gloves on, and it's good for them because it stimulates that coordination. They're able to box, and they focus on getting that energy out. And yes, you cannot necessarily reverse or cure any types of neurodegenerative diseases at this point. Unfortunately, we can slow it down, we can mitigate it, which is good. And it's getting better too, by the way. But as I mentioned, the key is trying to get it early onset. And again, as I keep repeating, personalizing it to ourselves. Because again, as I mentioned, everybody is different in here. What works for one person might not work for the other. And there are outliers, as I mentioned too. We saw the video of the 100-year-old ladies. Anybody in here, I may have told this. No, I didn't. Do you know George Burns, the comedian back in the 19... yeah, so... and sometime when he was about almost 99, he was on the David Letterman show. You probably remember, I see some of the nodding in here. And he was on the David Letterman show puffing his big cigar. And he was like almost 99 years old, comedian, and just wonderful guy. And David Letterman had asked him, he had said, gosh, you smoke those cigarettes? He said, or cigars, sorry, cigars. He said, yeah, every day for all my life. And he said, what does your doctor have to say about that? And George Burns just replied and said, I don't know, he's dead. And so, but you probably heard that before, I know. But again, that's true. That's a true, and Letterman just broke down. But it's really true. Again, like, we look at that, and the key is to enjoy life. I'm not suggesting, okay, go start smoking a cigar and you'll live to 99. I'm not saying that. But the key is to overall enjoy a really good life. And is it okay to have a drink once in a while? Well, in this book, Dr. Attia says don't even drink, period. He's big on, yes, there are studies that have shown you can have a glass of red wine and be okay. But when you compound alcohol and sugar alcohol, it's empty carbs, it's really better just to avoid it at all possible, if that's possible. If you can abstain from alcohol completely, you'll be way better off. And especially, again, going back to one of these, when they see the research on studies on some of these diseases, most of the time subjects were drinking some form of alcohol or maybe even abusing it. And when you look at alcohol abuse, what it does to the liver and the other vital organs, you don't even want to, there's no necessary. And then also smoking, just joking about the cigars, but the cigarettes, I think we've been better as a society. You don't see as many people smoking cigarettes and chewing tobacco as like we used to decades ago. So we've gotten so much smarter about that. But having said that, though, then why, is this such a problem too? Sleep. We live in a hustle and bustle society. I know that my contemporaries and where I work at is very competitive and the market's saturated, and you have no time to sleep, so to speak. If you're in my shoes, like you really have to go. And you hear about all these entrepreneurs, like the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the world, and they all tell you the secret to success is, I only sleep 4 hours a night and I work 20 hours a day. And in especially this country, you hear how well honored that is. It's like a badge of honor. And like I said, Dr. Attia in his book says that he experienced that. He was a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins doing his residency, and it was very esteemed to not take time off, to continue working and be sleep deprived, because if you went to rest and sleep, then they just saw that as, he can't hang, he's not tough enough. And he tells you one story where he's driving at night, and we could probably all experience, I'm sure some of us in here have gone through a similar story, and he literally almost like fell asleep at the wheel, and he pulled over and he stopped the car and he just slept for hours. And that's when he had an epiphany. He said, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. I'm on my way to do a surgery. And he said, I work on that patient. I'm going to hurt them. And he's like, am I doing that patient any good overall? And so his epiphany was the importance of sleep. We need about 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night. We want to make sure we're not getting too little sleep, and we don't want to sleep too much, because we need what's called good sleep, deep REM sleep, REM sleep cycle. And his advice on that is at nighttime, trying to do different types of what's called sleep hygiene. Don't get in front of the Kindle or the TV or the iPhone, which most people do, unfortunately, at least a couple hours before we go to bed. If you're sleeping, make the room a little darker and cooler if possible, and quieter too, avoiding any noise. And again, what helps with sleep too, in avoiding things like insomnia and such, is exercise. Again, you keep hearing that. And it's trying to balance what's called your circadian rhythm in your own internal clock. And again, I'm guilty of it. I'll tell you right now, I don't sleep enough. That's one of the problems that I have. And it's just basically because I think I'm stuck in that rat race right now of I'm an entrepreneur by trade, so I don't say no to business or work. So whenever I take on new business and new accounts and new work, I just keep going. But I'm trying my best to be a good steward and learn from this and be better, because there are tricks and suggestions that help with that as well. And again, the links to correlations of not enough sleep really messes with your mind. It could really damage a lot. My mother currently is going through really bad insomnia, and she is only 74, so she's a mere child. And she right now she's having trouble with sleep. She's going to see the doctors, and and she's in good shape otherwise, but she's not making a lot of sense during the day. And so she's working on that right now. And I'm going to try to get her and my dad to read that book as soon as possible. So nutrition, here's the key. Dr. Attia doesn't like the word diet. And you hear the fads too. The Mediterranean diet's the way to go. No, the Atkins diet. No, I got this diet. And you hear the carnivore versus the vegan versus the paleo. Which one is right? They're all over the place. I did a whole topic on nutrition one time in terms of talking about what are the best and what are the common denominators of some of the best. But the key concept on it is I can tell you the best plan, and unfortunately in this country, the obesity and people overweight is still increasing. In fact, in about 10 years, we'll be about 50% obese. That's not something to celebrate, of course. Right now, we're only about 40% of the population being obese. That's a problem. And again, it's because most of the people in this country don't do a lot of the things that we're doing in terms of exercise and diet, and getting enough sleep, and watching their mental health and wellness, and taking care of things like that. There are things that we can do, though, in general. I mentioned this earlier, the ketogenic, aka keto diet. That's his. He likes that one. He says that's, in his opinion, the way to go, and you've got to make sure you're doing it the right way. You can't, and here's what he means by that. Here's an example. If you're wondering about protein, in his opinion, is the best macronutrient out of carbs and fats. If you make sure you eat protein in a day. Don't have all your protein at once, though. How much protein should I eat? he recommends that whatever your body weight you are, that's the amount of grams you should have. So for example, I'm 200 pounds almost. I should have about 200 grams of protein per day. I should not have that in one meal or two meals. I should split that hopefully in 4 meals. So in my case, my example, about 50 grams of protein per meal if I'm eating 4 meals in a day, something like that. That would be an example. That's a lot of protein. How do I do it? I usually do protein shakes, protein bars, because I'm always on the run and I just keep them in my car and I find that more efficient. Not the best way to go, but best way to get your protein obviously is through whole organic foods, whatever lean meats, like for example fish and chicken, and cooked right. True too. I'm talking about baked and broiled and steamed. I'm not talking about fried and sauced and things like that. And then also fasting. He goes into that a little bit. There are benefits of what's called intermittent fasting, not so much prolonged fasting. You can do a prolonged fasting, but there's different reasons too. He doesn't recommend that. He thinks intermittent fasting is a good way to go. What that is just compressing the amount of food that you're eating in a certain given time. You've heard people eat, like they say, I only eat within 8 hours. The other 16 hours, I don't eat. That, again, I'm telling you this, you can try it. It may work great for some people. It may not work. I have clients who it does work for and who it doesn't work for. And also, this is important, don't just think, well, if I eat within that 8 hours, I can just eat whatever the heck I want. No. He's still talking about the not only timing, in this case, there's something called TR, DR, and CR. And what do they stand for? And I've talked about this before in a nutrition presentation, but TR is timing restrictions, and that's what we're talking about with intermittent fasting. DR stands for dietary restrictions. That's the quality of what you're eating. Make sure you're cutting out things like sugar and alcohol, caffeine, tobacco use, of course, but anything else nutrition-wise, stay away from all the high salty foods. Saturated fats. He's really big on avoiding saturated fats at all costs. If you're going to have fats, omega fats are good. Omega-3 fish oils, they are excellent. You can take them as a supplement if you're not already. There's a lot of benefits to avoiding and fighting some of the evil 4 that we're talking about here. Or the best way to get it is naturally through fish, if you just eat fish. But again, if nothing else, avocados, things that are your essential fatty acids, basically. Those are ones that would recommend to eat in your quality. And then the CR stands for calorie restriction. That's just portion control. That's portion size. He goes over examples of people who have tried an extreme low-calorie diet. This one guy, he only ate about 700 calories a day. He tried everything else under the sun, and he was able to eat 700 calories. He lost 65 pounds, and he was able to get off a lot of medications, reverse his diabetes and everything else. It worked for him, but again, that's one case. That's a case where he personalized what works for him. That might not work for someone else. So that's why we have to figure out what is our blood type, what is our insulin resistance level, what is our glucose level, how resistant are we to insulin. And so doing those tests, we can do that. We can go to professionals and get a VO2 max test. We can go ahead and have them do a glucose test on us, and all of this that we're talking about. So that way, again, it's really being your own personal trainer, your own personal advocate, your own captain of your ship. Your body is your ship, and you're like, I want to avoid all these icebergs, so this is what I'm going to do for myself. And then he talks about sugar. Sugar's just evil, period. That includes, by the way, I'm not really big on this is Taryn, not Dr. Attia talking. All of the different sweeteners like sugar, sweet and low, and I don't even know the other ones. Some of them have aspartame. I would, in my opinion, just try to avoid it at all possible, or cut it down in moderation, if nothing else. A good example of that, I have drank my coffee black now for almost 10 years because I had a dentist tell me, how much cream and sugar are you putting in? And this is a true story. I was like, a lot. And he was like, I want you to try it black for 30 days. I did, and ever since then, I was like, hey, you're right, that works. So there's little things like that we can try, because really, when it comes down to food, you know this already, but for example, you get a salad from Chick-fil-A, as soon as you put that dressing on there, that's become worse than a hamburger, right? It's because the calories from the little condiments, whether it's the ketchup and the mayonnaises and the salad dressings and salt and pepper, etc., we have to be careful of. This is by far arguably one of the most important slides because, as I mentioned, I said this earlier at the very beginning, and so did the 100-year-old lady, saying that exercise is the best medicine to combating any types of disease and to living with a better health span. Not only longer lifespan, but a better health span, meaning you're going to be feeling so much better. I can spend about another 30 minutes just on this slide alone. I won't, but I'll tell you right now that what Dr. Attia tells you to recommends in the book is to try to work in what's called zone 2 of your effort levels of cardiorespiratory. What do I mean by zone 2? Here's what I mean real quick. If I was to go for a light stroll outside, I'd probably be in about zone 1 if I walked about this pace right here, and I could still talk comfortably to you. If I started walking at a real brisk pace right here, and I'm taking breaths to have to keep up to talk to you, that's about zone 2. That's what you should do for the predominant time of exercise. He recommends 30 minutes. He says he does 45 minutes for himself and his patients. I would agree with that. Be aggressive as much as possible as you can. Stay in that zone 2, meaning, you notice, I wasn't sprinting. I don't mean that he's all out sprinting and doing jumping jacks and all that crazy stuff. He's doing like a power walk would be good. That's a zone 2. Why? Because you're burning more glucose and more body fat at that percentage rate than you would in terms of maximizing the calories that you're burning. Is it important to do high-level VO2 exercise? Yes, it is. He recommends doing 4 minutes of it. What I mean by that, running as fast as you can basically for 4 minutes, and then stopping for 4 minutes, pausing, resting, and then doing it 4 minutes again. So it's 4 minutes 4 times is his example of what to do when you're trying to increase your cardiorespiratory, because what that does is that increases your VO2 max. You've heard that before. That's your capacity to bring in oxygen. When you do that, great things happen. Not only does your blood pressure lower, does your heart rate reduce, but it also burns more calories. It increases metabolism speed. And again, it works hand in hand in conjunction of optimal exercise. When it comes to strength training, he recommends doing 3 days a week if possible. 3 days a week of strength training. That what we're talking about is doing like, push-ups, bicep curls, lat pull down, squats, anything like, core, a lot of core exercises, crunches, planks. And what that does is that not only helps with muscularity, the more muscle mass you could put on your body, the better it is if in case we were to fall down. If you had a bad fall, then more muscle you have, the more protection we have. The stronger your spine is, the better chances you have of avoiding that fall, of being able to be more stable. Another crazy thing he talks about, this, you can look this up, and I've never heard of it until I read the book, was called toe yoga. I bet nobody in here has heard of that, because if I didn't hear about it, nobody in here. Toe yoga, it's a real thing. He recommends it, and it is what it sounds like. Here's the example he gives from the book on that, by the way. I told you I was going to try not to spend too much time on this slide, but in the example of the NASCAR race car drivers, he's telling you that those tires are so precise in the amount of air that too much or too little can literally make or break not only wrecks and accidents and all that, but avoiding them being able to be as fast as they can and make those turns. Why does he use that as an example? Well, in our walking every day, our feet are neglected sometimes, and our toes, in toe yoga, the concept of that is literally focusing on the flexion and extension of your toes and doing like feet exercises, like rolling your feet circles, doing them up and down, working on pronation and supination with your feet. It is actually very important, and there's studies that show that this toe yoga concept, this phenomena, really does help with balance. It makes sense, because if you're going to work bicep curls and chest press, why would we neglect our feet? Our feet are our wheels on our car, basically. The more stable they are, then it makes sense that it's going to keep us upright and hopefully avoid from us falling or tripping or what have you. I'll give you another. Let me give you one more example, and I'll move right. This isn't from his book. I want to share this, so this is a cool story. I have a client that I train who's in his early 60s, and I've been working with him for about 1 year now. And one of the exercises that we do are lunge. Everybody knows what lunges are in here, right? Where you do a lunge. Everybody knows what lunges are, and they work so great. They're one of the best exercises for legs. And he'd always get on to me, and he'd always be like, why do we have to do lunges every day? And I'm like, because it's one of the best exercises you can do. He told me he's a member of Holy Trinity Church in Peachtree City off 54, if you're familiar with that. So he's Catholic. And he said, this happened just a few weeks ago, that they have a pedestrian walkway there, I guess, from the parking into the church. I'm not familiar with it. I've never been there. But he told me that when church was over with, they were walking on the pedestrian thing. He had literally tripped and then caught himself like this. And I'm telling the truth. I really, honestly, when he told me this story, I thought it was the coolest thing. He showed me. He said, I was able to stop. He said, I guarantee you, he's like, if we hadn't been working on that, I would have fallen right on my face, broken my teeth, broken my nose. and made a real embarrassment of myself. And I told him, I was like, that's the coolest story. I said, I'm going to share that. He said, well, please don't tell my name. I don't want to be embarrassed. I was like, oh, okay, I won't. So I'm not going to tell you who he is, but seriously, it's a true story, I promise. All right, let's move on from exercise, because again, this is about his book. Back to this, not about me. Emotional health, very important. I mentioned this, that the last chapter, he spends a lot of time on talking about this right here. Yes, physical fitness is important. Of course, we know about eating right and the importance of sleep. But if we don't have this, we have nothing. If we're not happy in life, there's no point in living. And the examples he talks about is that one time Dr. Attia was driving and this guy did something like a road rage and got out of the car. And Dr. Attia, by the way, is a real buff guy. He's like a boxer, like a stud. And so he's talking about this where the other guy came up and they almost got in a fist fight and he was able to stop himself and he didn't. And he had his kids with him and that could have ended really badly and they just moved on. Or another story that he shares is one of his kids had a very life-threatening ailment that almost took his life. And that was really scary too. There are things in our lives that have happened and that will happen, unfortunately. Look at the hurricanes in the last couple of weeks, right? There are more important things in life when it comes down to it. Our mental sanity. You know, if we were living in Asheville, North Carolina, or in Tampa, Florida right now, my God, would we worry about a road rager or something else that was insignificant in our life, right? Somebody that cuts us off on the road. I drive to Atlanta Monday to Friday, so I don't know how that is. I'm not the one that cuts people off. I'm the one that gets cut off, by the way. But if we knew right now what lifespan we had, if we knew, oh, okay, I'm going to live to 95, okay, would we worry about the insignificant little stuff in the day? No, we wouldn't, right? We would worry about what's important and the pursuit of happiness, but also being happy and emotionally stable. So important. I used my mom as an example earlier, and again, she's struggling because of the insomnia, and she's just not enjoying life. She's having a lot of depression right now, and it's serious. And we know people that have gone through that. We've dealt, again, there's a lot of correlations that we've talked about, but Dr. Attia recommends strongly getting some type of therapy and any types of counseling whenever possible. If we need to see a psychiatrist or a therapist or a counselor, whatever we're coming to, it's so important. He does something called DBT therapy. He actively pursues therapy for himself because he wants to keep himself emotionally stable. And it's important, it's important to really focus on important things. Another phenomena, the school shootings, it just keeps going up and up and up. Whenever something like that happens, one of the first interventions they do with the students and the faculty is that they get mental health counselors there. And it's so important because, unfortunately, I hate to go off this, veer off this tangent, but you've heard about the statistics and you hear about the variables of the shooter and the poor families and everybody that had to witness that. But then what we don't hear about later is the people that take their own life that were there that hurt, were firsthand to that. And there really is something to that. Here's another phenomenon. Remember about 4 years ago, the start of COVID, when that had happened, anxiety, depression, and mental problems just went out the roof. I mean, the business for psychiatrists went skyrocketing because people were having anxiety like none other that we ever saw, isolation, quarantining, and everything else. So he really does, again, I think, my own personal opinion, I think he spends a lot of time on this, and I think he made this intentionally the last chapter to kind of put a bow on it and say, look, all this is important, what we've talked about, but I want you to be happy. It's so important. I don't even know who it was, but there was a successful billionaire that at one time said, to make sure you don't chase money, chase happiness. And that stuck with me a long time ago. I was like, that's pretty good. But I think personally that if, the importance of just balancing everything out, if you look at your whole lifespan on a kind of a pie and you look at, okay, I need to be physically fit. This is my spirituality tangent. This is my financial wealth, which he uses, by the way, a lot of examples of how your physical health can correlate to financial health. And this is my well-being with friends. This is my social connectedness. It's so important to have some type of purpose in life and to be happy with where I'm at with my sense of well-being, because that ties in so much with everything in the brain and everything else with mental health. So how can we kind of summarize everything here? We've talked a lot in the last hour about, making little changes. I was really beating that drum of saying, this needs to be a personalized approach for yourself. don't compete against other people. That might be fun and all, but compete against yourself. Say, here's another cool story. Again, this seriously, one of my best clients, he's going to be 82 years old tomorrow. Is his birthday, and he's turning 82. And he's, oh, by the way, that guy Fred, he's the one that gave me this book to read. He was the first one to introduce me to that. And he told me he was so happy because a year ago, he is so much in better shape today than he is a year ago. And that's the truth. That has nothing to do with me. That's him, 100%. You know, I'm just the coach. I'm like the motivator. Like, good job. I can count 1, 2, 3. He's the one that's doing the work and the heavy lifting and the grunting and moaning and all that. So he deserves all the credit. But it's so true. And what I told Fred yesterday, I was working on, I said, just think where you'll be at next year when you're 83. You're going to be in much better shape. And that goes back, you know, last time I did a presentation on Younger Next Year. That's another great book, by the way. I did a whole presentation on that one. That really does tie into that whole Younger Next Year concept. And so, you know, when you think about it, if you're competing, and this is true in life, there's a real quick story and a scenario that you can look at. I was told this when I went to postgraduate school. When I was at one of my residencies personally, back in 2020, I think it was right before COVID started, early 2020, I remember that the provost came in and we were working on our dissertation, and at that point I was almost done with school. And to finish my dissertation, I was going to get my PhD in that year. And he had told all of us, he said, I know this has been a long journey for all of you. And he used the example of a marathon. And this always stuck with me. But in the marathon case, in this example, there were 2 people that he paid close attention to that had finished. You know how grueling a marathon is. I've never done it, but if you have or know, you know, 6 miles, that's a lot. But there were 2 examples they used. And one guy had finished in a phenomenal time. If you know about marathons, this guy's finished under 4 hours, like 3 hours, 50-some minutes. That's insane. That's crazy. That's an elite athlete. And he got on the ground after he finished, and he pounded the ground. He's angry. He's upset. And everybody was like wondering, like, what the heck? What is that about? He said, I didn't beat my time from last year. I was 3 hours and 45 minutes. And he said, I lost. And another guy came straggling towards the end, about 8 hours in, like just walking, and then finished crossing line and started crying and like pounding his chest, saying, oh, like in a happy way. And he was like, why are you so happy? He's like, that was my first marathon I ever did. He said, I didn't think I could do it. So that's really cool, the essence of comparing like what the example of, are you competing against someone else? Or because in that case, both of them had the same goal. They competed against themselves. And I think that's what it kind of bridges to what I'm going to ask everybody here. Can you make yourself a centenarian and be part of the decathlon? What can you do in terms of what did we learn today, you know, in being able to improve ourselves? What is, you know, kind of like, okay, now that I know a little bit more about the science and better, you know, eating and sleep and cognition, and again, how the heart and brain are so interconnected, how the 4 horsemen of the diseases can be prevented, especially, like I said, early detection, which means now, like today. That's when we need to go out there and get checked on screenings as much as possible. What adjustments can we make to optimize our aging? What can we do to make, again, if you look at that graph earlier, remember, what we want to do is not this in our health span. We don't want to do that and eventually die. Dr. Attia challenges us to take our health span and ride it out. You can even make it better, but that's the whole Younger Next Year concept. You can, this time next year, you can make your health span go this way, and that way, whenever you're supposed to die, it just drops, like a sudden drop, like I said. I know that's an illustration that's kind of like sudden, like, again, none of us want to look at that, and some of us are like, well, that's not going to happen, but eventually it sure will. But so Medicine 3.0, we've talked a lot about the different strategies. Check for the genetic testing, like again, especially for neurodegenerative diseases. The biomarkers, if you have anything like you know, the high calcium scores that runs in the family, especially the guys in this room, if you have any of, or you know, if you have related to men in your family, like uncles and fathers who have had health scares, heart disease, or that have died from any types of cardiovascular ailments, that's something to definitely get checked on. But especially if nothing else, just making sure that we're exercising, we're personalizing this program for ourselves. And, you know, again, that gives us what's called this longevity mindset, kind of looking long-term. Because all of those centenarians, they were looking long-range, I guarantee you, and they're also enjoying every day as it is. That's why, again, they're having fun. You heard them. They're exercising, using some of the services here that this place provides. And again, that is the key, you know, just kind of the real key themes is just really keeping everything together. And not only, like I mentioned, using the medical profession when possible, getting screenings, if you need medication, of course, you know, it has its place. and also supplementing a holistic approach with it as well. And so with that, just kind of that whole optimistic mindset approach, it's kind of throwing the ball out there. What is one new thing that you can do to kind of, quote, outlive your health span? So that pretty much wraps it up, and I'll go ahead and open it up to if there's any questions now. And as you do, if there are questions, I'll repeat the question and then kind of throw the ball back out there. But any questions from anybody about anything we covered? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of nutrition, what about supplementation, taurine, or some of the
Yeah.
other?
Certainly. In Dr. Attia's philosophy of nutritional, what he calls nutritional biochemistry, that's something that he does he has a podcast on, and he is big in supplements. They definitely have their places. With supplements, I mentioned about the essential fatty acids like omega-3s, for example, but things like taurine and L-glutamine and L-arginine and your amino acids, they're wonderful because what they do is they kind of help fill the gaps of nutritional deficiency. If we're not eating 100% what we should be in a day, then hopefully if we're taking a good, if nothing else, definitely a good multivitamin for sure. Here's another thing to answer that question as well. I do want to stress, I don't think that personally, like Walmart, Publix, they might not have the best in terms of bang for your buck, because I think some of these giant box stores use some more synthetics and fillers. Personally, and this, by the way, this aligns with Dr. Attia. He really strongly recommends going to one of these type of specialty, like Vitamin Shop or Peachtree, whatever they're called, the health food stores. The natural supplement stores. The reason is because they tend to go more with a whole foods approach of using less fillers, less synthetics, and you're going to get a better, just value out of whatever you're purchasing for that supplement. So I think it's important to do that personally. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Have you heard of Puritan's Pride?
I haven't heard of that. No, ma'am. What is it called? Puritan's Pride? Is that a brand of a supplement?
Supplement price.
Oh, okay. That's the one that you go to? Oh, okay, good. But you order from them? Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, Puritan's Place. I'll check it out too. Yes.
Pride.
Puritan Pride.
Puritan Pride. Sorry, I said it wrong. Puritan Pride. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay, that's good. Oh, Puritan's Pride. I've got it now. Okay, plural. More than one Puritan. Thank you.
You suggested that we have a DEXA scan every year.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, good point. The question was that DEXA scan, DEXA scan. If you just Google search DEXA scan near me, you'll see that they actually come to you. There's like the vans, and they have all the equipment. They'll come to meet you. I think there are I have Kaiser Permanente. They do DEXA scans at Kaiser facilities, I learned. And I think they're cheaper than 70. I think they're like 50. So wherever you can just look that up, he strongly recommends, I should say. But I think it's a great idea, too, to do that whenever possible.
Facilities you said that you went to?
Well, I have Kaiser Permanente for my health. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I have Kaiser. Yeah, but I bet depending on your insurance, if you go on your insurance company's website, they'll probably have something like that listed, I would guess, like with DEXA scanning and things like that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, speaking of the DEXA scan, when I think of that as they're only checking for osteoporosis. How do you tell them you want one that's testing fat in your organs and everything else?
Oh, for all of that, yeah. That's where they use ultrasound, and they also use some type of other, what is that called? I'm blanking it. Not an MRI. Well, maybe it is an MRI. They do some types of, there are some facilities that will do that a little bit more in depth. In fact, again, going back to Kaiser, they'll do that too, depending on what I want checked. But I bet, like, if you went to your doctor and told them the list of what, whatever primary care physician that you use, I'll bet they have some type of protocol where they would have that, again, that's where you have to be your own advocate and be proactive and say, I want this, this, and this checked. And if you get the book, he really goes into that more in detail and in depth of what he recommends you should be checking. But for sure, like you mentioned, that was a good point with women with osteoporosis. He spends a lot of time talking about muscle mass and strength training because of addressing things like that. That's so important and crucial. Yeah.
I just want to add, while you were talking about the toe yoga, I googled it, and some people call it toga.
Toga, I haven't heard that. That's good. Oh, that's so funny. That's hysterical. Yeah, I'll have to try. Yes, back in the back. Yes, ma'am.
For sleep, for your mom, what are you all trying?
Oh gosh, I couldn't even tell you what medicines. She's gone to the doctor. She lives down in the Panhandle, like Sandestin, Florida. So I think their reach of medical professionals is kind of limited. If she was up here, you got, like Emory and Piedmont and everything else. But I think she's my dad told me the medicines she's tried, and whatever they are, I don't know if a lot of sleep medicines are very similar to antidepressants they found. And I've taken a sleep medicine before that's worked for me. She has tried melatonin, didn't help. Melatonin works great for me. Again, goes back to, I see a lot of shaking heads. Melatonin puts me to sleep, but everyone's different. She has, the medicines that she's tried, some of them have worked, but then she feels totally loopy the next day. So the doctor's like cut the...
Diphenhydramine. A lot of those medicines have that.
Diphenhydramine, yeah.
Diphenhydramine. Anybody over 65 should not be taking it because it actually brings on dementia.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
You can go to PubMed.gov.
Yeah, that's a good research. Oh, yeah, that's a good research study. Okay.
It does that. It's an
wow.
energy medicine, sleep medicine.
Yeah, like Benadryl, I think, is the main. That's what I thought. Yeah. Over 65. I've not heard that. So.
Every night for sleep? No.
Well, thank you for I'll check on that then. I appreciate you letting me know. That's good to know. Wow. So I never heard that, but that's good to know. Wow. That's pretty wild.
I had a bad experience.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, one more time. I'll put it on the screen here. Let me put it on the screen so everybody can see it. How do I do that? Let me see. Slideshow. Can you see that okay? Oh, not now. Yeah. So Dr. Attia, and he co-authored it with a guy named Bill Giffords. We should give him some credit too. But I had, like I said, Fred, that 82-year-old recommended. He told me to get this book, but I had like 2 or 3 other clients tell me also to get this book as well. So I was like, okay, I better jump in and read it. So that's why I decided it'd be a good idea to do the presentation on it. But again, we really kind of try to do a deep dive on all the high level things, but there's a lot of good examples that he uses in there that kind of cover some of the things that you can really just really get lost and deep into kind of researching some of the topics that he discusses in them. But that pretty much overviewed all 17 chapters that are in that book. That was all of them. Yes, ma'am.
And I think what caused him to make the shift, wasn't it that he saw that medicine in 2.0 was about just treating?
Yeah, right, yeah.
To thinking wellness.
That's correct, yeah, and you're right. How did you read some? Oh, perfect, good. Oh, that's wonderful. Again, like I said, if I had known that, I would have had you come up here. But you remember he talks about what's called asymmetrical risk. You remember that? It's where he discusses, like, in medical training, it's like their job is very deductive. Like, no, I'm just supposed to do A and then B and C, and we're supposed to keep the patient alive. They don't think asymmetrical risk, meaning, and to your point, Dr. Attia was like, well, gosh, why can't we try this? Yes, there's a little risk, but the reward would be really good. Why don't we do that? And he went against his superior, who he got yelled at for saying you weren't supposed to do that. And he said, yeah, but that would be better for the patient, though. Well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't say that in protocol. And that's what made him get outraged because of that reason. He had left Johns Hopkins, and he had decided that, you remember the dream of the eggs being tossed, and he was trying to catch all the eggs. And that's what all the doctors are trying to do. Well, he thinks it's better to, why don't we go after and find out who's throwing the eggs? That's kind of that proactive meaning. And so that's basically going after the 4 horsemen. Like, what does cause this? And yeah, you're right. That's why he left that profession. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Does it say anything about eating out at restaurants versus cooking at home?
I don't recall that right away, but I will tell you this: that I listen. By the way, if you go on YouTube, you can search him up. He has his own podcast there for free. He covers certain topics just on nutrition. I'm sure that's in there. I don't remember that in the book, but I will tell you this. He will tell you that he's a very big advocate of eating whole foods when possible, meaning the less man has touched it, the better. So if it's right off the tree or out of the ground to your mouth, that is the best, versus the more processed that it's been to putting preservatives on it and flavors and things like that. My guess is that he would probably be very anti-restaurant, because when we go out to eat, you have the chefs putting it there to make it taste so good for us. And so if we make it ourselves, most likely it's probably going to be not only a lot healthier, but a lot more affordable too, I would guess. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
What was the harmful ingredient in Benadryl that you mentioned?
I can't pronounce it. Diphenhydramine. I much less spell it. Yeah, I'll have to Google that. Yeah. But when you said it, I remember I knew it was Benadryl. I knew that was it. Yeah, because I always get if I had taken Benadryl, I get the off-brand, which that's what it's called. It's just called that name, not called Benadryl. It just says compared to ingredient count of Benadryl. So.
It's probably fine. But
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that. So over 65, don't. Yeah, that's good to know. I love learning something new all the time. That's helpful. So.
That's where emotional maturity comes in.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That is very, very true. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I definitely want to stress because I've been through with it with my family members, my mother, my grandmother, one of my first cousins, and I have an aunt that's living now. It is true in their case, sugar is a dangerous thing. It will affect your mind. I have an aunt that's living up in Indiana. She very seldom eats anything sweet. She eats a lot of vegetable, and I can call her right now. She's going to be 92 in December, and she's like, "Hello, Teresa, how you doing?" But sugar, in terms of dealing with my mother, my grandmother, my first cousin, it did affect their mind, and they love sugar.
Wow.
I always like to analyze things, and I looked at the commonality, and it was sugar.
There you go. Yeah.
Please be careful of that.
Thank you. Great testimonial. I bet the 92. She'll probably be on the video in another time. She will. Yeah, she will.
I change my voice. She said, "Hello, Teresa."
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Oh, that's great. Wow. Yes, ma'am.
along with Ron, I have a very good testimonial. During 2020, my daughter, who works for IT and a lot of things, lost her job. Okay, right at March, the 1st of March, and then we went into all of this lockdown thing. And so we're thinking, what is it? What can we do? And she came up with, let's just go take a road trip. So she started out, we want to see all the bridges, covered bridges in Georgia, which they say there's 200, but there's only 20 you can actually see. So we just, we didn't go anywhere. We took our own roast. It was a day trip. Once a week, we took a day trip. And we would take our own food. We took our own water. We'd fill up with gas, and we would go and see stuff. And then we got onto the historical Georgia sites. She did. She's the researcher. Okay, let's go. And we did this the entire year. Now, the whole time, she's like stressed out. I'm like, okay, where are we going this week? She has gotten on the historical website. She has looked up things. The only place we didn't go was South Georgia because it got warm and there's just gnats and it gets uncomfortable. But we went to places, we saw things like the courthouse in Jaspers, all marble. All marble.
Wow.
Now, we couldn't go in, but we could look at it, we could read the post, we could read what it said in this site. And I have to say, everybody that I know has stressed through 2020, and we didn't. Now, it was a little stressful toward the end when she still didn't have a job, but it just made a whole difference. So that was that mental bit.
Yeah.
We found something to break that negative cycle, that negative thinking.
Great
and
example.
The further rural we got, it was interesting how people weren't quite so locked down. You could go, you had arrows in the grocery store. You didn't necessarily have to have a mask, but it was interesting. One time we were going somewhere and we dead in at a street, and in front of us was a bison herd. Oh. Yeah,
wow.
Who knows you have bison in Georgia? Now, where could we go back to that and find it? Not a clue. But it's just little interesting things like that happened. Another time we ran into a whole, I think it was like 6 alpacas in among the cows. It was just so, there are ways to counter that negativity. I'm just so glad she found that idea. And now we could probably be tour guides about different things.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And on that, to wrap everything up, thank you very much. A great way to put an exclamation on it. Well, I see that we've gone past our time. I'm sorry we kept a little bit longer, but thank you very much. Yes, thank you again, and we will look forward to seeing you all soon and doing the next topic. So you all have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Thank you. Appreciate it.